3 hours. 2 unaligned holes. 4 mystery bolts left on the floor. 1 degree of lean. The flat-pack wardrobe is, by any neutral standard, a small disaster. To a stranger passing by at a garage sale, it is worth $12. To the person who built it, $30. In a 2012 study, undergraduates who folded their own origami frog rated it roughly 5 times more valuable than the same frog folded by someone else. The frog wasn't better. The folder was just attached. This is one of those moments where the brain doesn't break. It just runs the wrong subroutine. Here's which one and why. In 2011, 3 behavioral economists, Michael Norton at Harvard, Daniel Mochon at Tulane, and Dan Ariely at Duke, wrote a paper they called The IKEA Effect When Labor Leads to Love. It appeared in the Journal of Consumer Psychology in 2012. The design was simple. Bring people into a lab, hand half of them a kit, an IKEA storage box, an origami crane, a Lego set. Hand the other half the finished version, built by an experimenter. Then ask everyone how much they would pay to take their object home. By every neutral standard, the 2 groups should converge. The objects are identical in function. The materials are identical. Buying behavior, in a frictionless market, would price both at the same number. That is the normative model. Value lives in the object, not in the assembler. Norton's group found something else. Self-assemblers consistently bid 63 to 70% more than non-assemblers for the same final item. Across 3 experiments, with different objects, with different participants, effort, somehow, was leaking into price. The economists had a name for the assumption being violated. Homo economicus values goods independently of who made them. The lab found that Homo sapiens does not. Here is the misfire in one diagram. Input, an object is assembled by hand. Process, the brain encodes time, motor effort, and small frustrations as costs that have already been paid. Output, when asked later to value the object, the brain, silently, treats those costs as evidence that the object is worth more than its parts. Norton's group called this the effort heuristic, building on earlier work by Justin Kruger in 2004. The heuristic is one line. More effort means higher value. As a rough estimator in the wild, it isn't even bad. Skilled labor really does correlate with quality on average. The misfire is not the rule. The misfire is what happens when the rule fires on the wrong inputs, like 45 minutes spent looking for a 4mm screw that rolled into beige carpet. A 2012 follow-up made the mechanism crisp. Mochon and his colleagues had subjects start to assemble objects, but cut them off before completion. The IKEA effect did not weaken. It disappeared. Effort without completion produced no premium at all. That was the smoking gun. The brain is not just summing minutes spent, it is running an attribution. I built this. I, the agent, succeeded. The object inherits my success. Buechel and Januszewski added the next constraint in 2014. The effect requires perceived competence. People who botched the assembly so badly they noticed showed no premium. The brain wants effort, completion, and a believable claim of skill. Then the price gets quietly bumped. The original Norton studies reported a large effect. In Cohen's terms, a Cohen's D, the standard effect size measure, of roughly 0.85. That is a textbook number, the kind that gets cited for years and lands in undergraduate slides. The IKEA effect entered the literature right around the time behavioral economics was learning to be honest about itself. From roughly 2015 onward, the replication crisis reshaped the field. Loved findings shrank. Some vanished entirely. In 2017, Marco Sarstedt and a group at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich ran a pre-registered replication of the central Norton experiments. Larger sample, tighter controls. The direction held, self-assemblers still bid more. The magnitude did not. Their best estimate of the effect landed closer to a D of roughly 0.45, with confidence intervals that excluded 0 but did not touch the original. The boundaries got clearer too. Marsh, Kangieser, and Hood ran the same paradigm on children in 2018. Even 5-year-olds showed a premium for their own clay pots over identical pots made by another child. The effect is not an artifact of consumer culture. It seems to be developmentally early, part of the ontogeny of self. But the effect has limits. It weakens when an audience watches the assembly and clearly sees mistakes. It weakens when assembly is interrupted. It weakens, Sarstedt noted, when the object is hedonic rather than utilitarian. People attach less to a self-painted picture than to a self-built shelf. And when participants are told explicitly, before they bid, that effort is not a marker of quality, the gap narrows further. So, the misfire is real. It replicates in direction. It is roughly half the size the 2012 paper made it look. Boundary conditions are now well documented. Cross-cultural replication, though, is sparse. Almost every subject tested so far is from the United States, Germany, or the United Kingdom. That last gap matters more than it sounds, and we will come back to it. Learning about the IKEA effect does not make it stop. That is one of the uncomfortable patterns across cognitive misfires. Awareness is a weak debiasing tool. People told about the bias, then asked to value their own work, still inflate. The published numbers are in the same range with or without warning. What does work is changing the structure of the decision, not the mind making it. One evidence-based move. When valuing something you built, a project, a piece of code, a launched product, get the number from someone who did not build it. Norton himself has put it this way in interviews. Don't trust the price you set on your own work. The price you set carries the receipt of your effort. The price a stranger sets does not. A second move, supported by Mochon's completion studies. Separate the finishing decision from the valuing decision. A startup founder deciding whether to keep building is pulling the full weight of every paid cost into the answer. The cleaner question is the one that locks effort out. If I were starting today, knowing what I now know, would I begin this? Founders who can sit with that second question without letting sunk effort answer for them tend to choose differently. A third move is environmental. Anonymize. Code reviews where the author is hidden produce different verdicts than reviews where the name is visible. The IKEA effect doesn't only inflate your own work, it inflates the work of people identified as fellow builders. Removing authorship is cheaper than retraining the brain. None of this is be more mindful. All of it is structure. The brain is built to treat costs as evidence. If something was hard, it must have mattered. If attention was spent on it, it must be important. If it was survived, it must have been worth surviving. These are reasonable rules in a world where, on average, hard things signal real value. Each of them, taken alone, is a misfire waiting to happen. Sunk cost in the kitchen, anchoring in negotiation, availability in the news cycle. The IKEA effect is the same general machinery applied to a person's own creations. Daniel Kahneman, K.H. Neyman, would put this in his familiar two-system frame. The fast, intuitive, attribution-driven system runs the effort as value heuristic by default. The slow, deliberate, market-aware system could check it, but almost never does, because the answer feels obviously correct. Of course, the wardrobe is worth $30. Look what it took to make. The structural problem is older than IKEA. Evolution optimized for agents who valued their own foraging effort. The berries a forager picked really were more hers than the ones on the next bush. Stock markets, code reviews, and startup postmortems came later. The hardware did not get an update. Almost every replication of Norton's work runs in weird samples. That's Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic. The original 2012 paper used American undergraduates. Sarstedt's 2017 replication used German consumers. Marsh's 2018 study used British 5-year-olds. What the IKEA effect looks like in cultures where individual creation is less central to identity, or where craft is credited collectively rather than personally owned, is genuinely unknown. Joe Henrich at Harvard, who has spent 2 decades documenting how unusual weird samples actually are, would predict the effect should be smaller in collectivist cultures. The premium, he would say, should attach to the group's work rather than yours alone. I made this, so it's worth more, becomes we made this, so it's worth more. And the individual inflation fades into a shared one. There is no clean cross-cultural test of this yet. The closest published work, a small 2020 study comparing Japanese and American consumers, found suggestive support for a smaller premium in the Japanese sample, but the sample was modest, and the study was not pre-registered. A properly powered pre-registered replication across a dozen cultures has been proposed inside the Psychological Science Accelerator network. At the time of writing, it has not run. Look back at the wardrobe. 3 hours, 4 extra bolts, 1 degree of lean. To the stranger, $12. To the assembler, $30. The wardrobe did not change between those two prices. The mind did. An old useful rule, fired in a context where it does not quite belong, and added a tax to the answer that the assembler cannot see. That is the misfire. Next episode, the same brain, fully aware of all of this, still cannot kill a project it has spent 2 years on. The IKEA effect is one slice of that larger pattern. Subscribe if the rest of the pattern matters.